Have you heard of ProtoConcept? They're a relatively new company. They've got 3 brand new models. We're going to tell you why they might just be the most interesting irons on the market right now.
Yeah, they're pretty neat. So this is a Japanese company. They make really nice forgings. This is basically a blade, the first one we're looking at here. Really clean looking, right? I mean, there's nothing negative about this I could possibly think of. Pretty standard blade. The difference is it's actually hollow inside. They've got actually a cutout through this thing, and basically they put that ceramic material inside, which basically is a cavity inside what looks like a blade.
So this is a take on a hollow body blade, but it's not hollow body, right? So
right, yeah.
Touching on what you said, awesome looking, and what I do love, and it goes through all 3 models, and the blade specifically, is that leading edge. Have a look at the leading edge on the
they definitely rounded the leading edge a bit. I mean, there's a little bit of
full grind. Nowhere near like a Shrixon style, but
no, by any means, but not that wide. But it's pretty traditional. But the back's ground off a little bit, so it's a relatively narrow sole. Oh, it's got some meat on the bottom. Right?
Yeah,
it's not super thin. And the leading edge, they definitely rolled a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So just clean looking club.
And then you got some trailing edge relief as well, which is nice to lay it back. You got, this is called C01 and then TB, so Tour blade. So it's definitely aimed at the blade. And now let's touch on the hollow body. It's forged, but they forged a billet of ceramic in it.
Right.
Why ceramic?
Well, first of all, it feels good, right? It's a solid material, super hard. But it's also lighter.
Lighter than the body, right?
Lighter than the body, right? So basically by doing that, what they're doing is they're putting a cavity in it. It has some other advantages too. It probably it does feel well. You can definitely feel the difference from that standpoint. So there's definitely some advantages to it. Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at the grouping. This is very rare for us to do, but we put this as the 80 mile an hour test, and we'll get into why we did that later. But we did the 80 and the 90. And the 80 mile an hour test, we got great stopping power. It's a 32-degree club, so it's going to do well at that range. Carried 150, so although this is hollow body, it's definitely not like a jumpy, springy kind of distance club.
No, you don't get any of that out of it.
No. We have seen blades that kind of do that with the Concept iron and can be really, really hot, even though it looks like a blade. This isn't that. This is more of a precision instrument. And then 273 spin launch. At this speed, that's actually quite high.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's really high.
Miss hits, we get some drop off, right? Because it's still a blade.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of. I mean, obviously there's sort of a cavity in there that helps actually lower the CG a little bit, gets you a little more launch and spin, which we're kind of seeing. But it's not super forgiving heel to toe.
Yeah.
So it's certainly in the heel area, which is not blade, not a great place to hit it to begin with. It's going to drop off quite a bit. Yeah. But that's not what this club is designed for. It's designed for a better player. So.
And it rates better in the tour performance rating for obvious reasons, right?
Yep,
it's aimed at that better striker of the ball. Let's have a look at this at 90 miles an hour in that test there. So now we've got 343 spin launch was in the middle of the pack, because this would be considered a slightly stronger lofted than other blades. And then we've got 170 yards, which is right in the middle of the pack of where all the blades are going.
Yeah, it's almost dead standard, right? So, just right in the middle of everything. Yeah. For that kind of club.
The consistency around the horizontal center, across to the heel, toe, and middle is good. And then we see the actual drop-off is very consistent. That's the interesting thing, is the drop-offs are all in the same spot, although lower, for obvious reasons, lower in the graphing.
Right. I mean, it's not going to be a huge, super forgiving club by any means, but as blades go, it's pretty good forgiving. I mean, the tour rating is really pretty high. And I got a great stopping power as well. Yeah,
I'd be interested to see the feel and people's feedback on having ceramic in a golf club. It's not something you hear of every day.
Yeah, I can feel a little bit, but it's hard to tell. Yeah. They have to compare it to other clubs, neck to neck, and probably outside, because sounds a lot of feel. Yeah. And indoors is kind of a little bit muted. It really sounds different. So. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is one of 3 models. Let's move on to the next one. So it's kind of all prime numbers. We've got 1, 3, and 5. So let's go to the 3.
Prime number, I like that.
The C03, and it's called TC, and this is the Tour cavity. So it's actually genuinely got a cavity.
It's like a little bit of a hole,
slot cut into it, right? Same story in terms of like the look. You can just look at all
very
of them,
similar look. As a matter of fact, you definitely could blend these two. Certainly the lofts aren't crazy different or anything like that. So.
Well, that's the thing, and I didn't want to touch on it earlier, give it all away, but these are all at 32 degree 7 irons.
Right, so you definitely can blend them.
Yeah. the story's
It
there.
almost look like they're designed for that, like most clubs are these days, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all three of these you could definitely design, to mix together. You could use blades and wedge 9, the slot cavity back, and then the one that's got, a little bit more of a springy face and a deeper undercut cavity in the long irons.
Yeah. The cavity's interested in this. It's not like the whole back is like a slot
No,
cut
no,
in the
actually
bottom.
it just looks like they just milled an area out here, which,
Yeah.
when you're forging a club, there's only so many ways to get into a cavity if you're not doing a two-piece. And what they've done basically is come down here and just mill out this part.
And that's also, so that's going to remove weight from that section. So it's going to kind of drag that weight lower and further back.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep, there's a little bit more weight in the back, so it'll definitely help a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we can see that with the graph in. If we're looking at just the 80-mile-an-hour test on the next
This
two
is
models,
really good, actually.
It does get really good.
For an 80-mile-an-hour test for a club that basically is a blade, right? It's a little bit of a cavity back blade, but it's definitely not by any means any tungsten weighting in here or anything crazy. It did really well.
And what they have got to note here is they use the CAD program to adjust the center of gravity for each iron down the set. So they're going to be dialed in to be going straight throughout the bag rather than the 4 iron ended up missing right and the wedge going easier left.
Yeah.
Launching higher in the 4 iron. The interesting thing is the same loft, it's got 4 yards more carry than the TB.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Right. So maybe the launch characteristics changed up a little bit with that center of gravity.
Yep.
But what we did see is that grouping tighten up, so that effective perimeter weighting of the milling that you saw.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would make that much difference, but I mean, it definitely did.
Right?
It's considerable, yeah, at that speed for sure.
So I mean, I love to look at this thing. There's no, I've played blades over the years and cavities, and this thing sits right in that wheelhouse of. It looks like a blade, but you're actually going to get a bit more bang for your buck for it.
Right, but you're not like giving anything up. I mean,
No.
there's no like we talked about a little bit. I'm not so wild about some of the springy faces that are out there. They're great because if you really need distance and height and all that stuff, that's the only way to get it. The downside is obviously as you miss it off center, you lose a lot more distance.
Yeah.
These don't have any of that stuff.
No.
So if you're not going to get a lot of extra distance out of these at all, but they are consistent.
Yeah,
and the
precision.
grouping's pretty tight.
And look at the tour performance rating.
Yeah, that's super high.
I think one of the highest that we've seen.
It is actually,
especially in this category. Again, 32-degree lofts helps because it tightens up the grouping.
Right.
Stopping power is great. Spin launch is even higher than the blade, so that's excellent.
Right.
This thing's a real control machine.
Yeah, it's just a good looking club all around.
Last point on this is that leading edge again. It
Yeah,
just
same sort of
matches
thing
up.
on the bottom. It's a little bit wider sole than the other ones, as you
Yep.
can tell. There's a little more camber in the front, obviously a little steeper for these, for a little bit wider sole. And the back's, obviously all ground off too. So, it's got a little bigger footprint, and we'll talk about that later as we start looking at some CAD stuff. But it's not huge.
No,
by any
it
means.
opens up a bit more angle of attack. People.
Yeah, you could definitely get a steeper player into these than you probably could the blade.
Yeah.
But it's some of the reasons some of the different sole configurations are just designed for different people, different angles of attack. Basically, is what changes that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, last but not least, we've got the C05, and this is TP standing for tour pocket. So this is a little more than a cavity. This is a literal pocket.
Yeah, well, this one looks a little different. Let's pull this one up because this obviously goes all the way to the bottom. So you got a slightly thinner face all across. So it should give you a little more spring effect off the face. I mean, it's thin enough that you get a little bit. I mean, not a ton. It's not going to be super springy. But this channel goes all the way to the bottom, it looks like. So
it's even going to be hard to see on B-roll because it's like so neatly placed in there. But you can see a little slot from where I'm sitting right now, nothing. And then you just get over the top of it a little bit from the angle, and you can see that goes right down in the head there.
Yeah, it goes all the way down. So the whole face basically is connected on the edges, and that's it. So that would lead to be quite a bit more forgiving than the predecessor.
Yep.
Because it's attached all the way on the edges, so it does help premiere weighting, and obviously it lowers the CG a little bit.
Yeah, perfect.
Because they've moved all this mass back, which helps. So this obviously launches a tiny bit higher.
Right. But we trade off, so the yardage between the 5 and the 3 is identical.
Right.
And the performance rating in the Tour is identical here. So this is a great Tour performance rating for what they're calling a pocket. So I guess this is, it's a real full cavity club. It's a really, really good, accurate cavity club.
Yeah, it's not big and bulky by any means. There's not a lot of offset in any of these.
No.
Obviously, a little progressive as they go through the sets. These get a little bit more and more offset, but there's still not much. Certainly no issue blending, all 3 sets.
Right.
Yeah, and I haven't really hit this one, but I'm assuming this probably make a little different feel to it as well.
Well, these have had prior models, and they've changed them, I think, for the better. They've kind of got rid of this black color in the back. And
yeah, it looks a lot cleaner than their old one. The old one looked, obviously it looked a little more prototypey, right?
Yeah,
It was kind of more raw. looking. This looks like a fully finished club.
Yeah.
And looks really slick.
Talked about the sole. Is it any wider than the prior two models?
A little bit. You know, as you go through the sets, you know, they definitely get a little wider. These are pretty similar.
Pretty close.
It's a little bit wider. Same thing though. They've sculpted the back off, you know, which is kind of a standard grind. And if anything, they've added a little
Even
more to
more,
this.
yeah.
So as you get steeper angle attack, certainly you kind of lean towards the pocket one.
Yeah, that's really, I guess, what it's about. In this, you're not trying to gain distance. You've got precision. The
Right.
grouping is fantastic in this last one for
Yeah,
what could
really
be
is.
considered a bigger club. Even in the tour rating, this is a real contender. And we do lose a little bit of spin launch. So obviously the spin and the launch kind of get closer towards each other on this one.
Yeah.
So let's look at it from a numbers perspective, looking at the 80-mile-an-hour test for all three, just to see how much we could blend them possibly.
Well, like I said, you know, if you look through this information, you know, the lofts are identical, a
Yep.
32-degree loft. Distances, obviously the blade's a little bit shorter, 150 versus 154. It's not a ton. I mean,
So you
that's
could strengthen it maybe 1 or 2 degrees in the
maybe
blade.
half a degree.
Right, okay.
You know, not even, you know,
Yep.
not much. You know, launch, obviously, the pocket one goes the highest.
Yep.
That makes sense,
So they're
right?
the highest
Instead of
one,
lowest
and
EG.
then half a degree between that, and
Right.
then maybe a little less.
Yeah,
than the
and
next one.
look, if you look at how they're kind of spaced out here, they're spaced out perfectly. Like
Really
22, if you know, round a little bit, right? 22, 21 and a half, and 21.
Yep.
So, you know, as they get, you know, to more of the blade, they launch a little lower.
Which is what you'd want to
Which
see.
again, if you're going to blend a set, you know, a little lower short irons would be great, and a little more height in the long irons makes sense. So, again, it kind of leads to, you know, blending them
Yep.
for sure.
Spin rate's fairly consistent. We're kind of splitting hairs around that, especially between the blade and the top one.
Yeah,
So-
they're all pretty much the same. And if you look at the, you know, the spin launch numbers, the spin divided by launch, they're all kind of right in that
Yeah.
270 range, which is, you know, pretty
All,
standard.
all we're going to see is basically off the face, the blade's going to come out here, and then here, and then here as you get to the
Right,
five,
but
right?
it's small.
Small increments, yeah.
Not a lot. And if you look at like the overall ratings, you know, these are certainly not big and bulky looking game improvement clubs. So you wouldn't expect it to be super high. But, you know, 4.4 and 4.2, I mean, it's not bad.
No.
For something in a small, clean looking package like this. And the tour ratings are all great. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, 4.7s are phenomenal. And even 4.5 in the other one. These are all very good around the center.
This is a really interesting set of golf clubs because it's aimed at the precision player, definitely aimed at someone who likes maybe the Japanese style looking golf clubs. They're very, very pretty. It's got great sole design, which opens up a bit more, you know, use for a wider range of players.
Yep.
We've got different styles of forgiveness. We've got really, really accurate and great stopping power. So I can't even put a handicap range on this. Is all you're trading off compared to like game improvement is that surface area. They're not huge from heel to toe.
Yeah, I mean,
and
this
front
is
to
probably,
back.
you know, under 18 handicap, obviously.
Right.
But you probably could be a 15 or 16, especially with a pocket one.
Yeah.
No problem. You know, and relative to how good an iron player you are, too.
Yeah.
The one downside I would say is, you know, obviously they're not super long. So if you really need distance, it's probably not the club for you. But if you're not looking for distance and, you know, all around and be able to blend a really clean looking set of clubs, hard to beat. And the other thing they do really well on these two is because they're Japanese forged and stuff. I mean, the heads come in plus or minus like a gram. I mean, they're perfectly weighted. You don't have to be putting weight down the hosels or have issues with swing weights and stuff. I mean, they're dead on.
Yeah.
So they're really quality material.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. I don't think there's going to be many places where you're going to get to test these. So head to a Cool Clubs near you and book your fitting today.